the browse has a slower energy, has a slower grow back time than grass. And so typically goats eat themselves out of their habitat because they kill the brush, they kill the browse, and then the grass comes. That's why goats improve land. That's why people get them to improve land. They eat up all the honeysuckle, and then you got a nice pasture. So speak to that tension a little bit with habitat and the energy cycle of the browse versus the grass.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So they do. I mean, if given the option, they're going to eat above themselves. So they're going to eat that browse first. They love the vines, they love the bushes and the shrubs, and basically everything else that nothing else loves. So they will go for that first. And you're right, it does grow back a lot slower than the grasses and the forbs do, which is why it said, they'll put themselves out of a job. Um, but they will. So they will graze if their browse isn't an option. And for the dairy goats in particular who are in milk, I mean, milk is the most metabolically expensive task that the body can do, even more than pregnancy or growth. So we haven't found that our does get too fat on a nice pasture mix. I absolutely think that the Weathers and the Bucks do because it's so rich, um, and they're not producing anything. So, I mean, similar to a dairy cow, and I would imagine a sheep, um, a good dairy animal is going to milk off of their back. And so, if her, if her needs are not being met calorically or nutritionally, she's going to start to lose top line in an attempt to maintain her milk production.
Right. Right.
So, our heavy producing milkers, um, they love the pasture as far as, the alfalfas and the clovers and the grasses. We don't have a lot of it right now because we do still, so we have 16 acres. It was conventionally farmed in the 80s, I believe, which is hard to imagine because it's quite a lot of hills. Um, but then it was just left. So we have a lot of brush and small trees, and we are using the goats to sort of open it up and create a silvopasture. But when we were on the 3 acres before, we didn't have any woods, and we rotated them as we did the sheep, and they grazed. The one thing with the goats, that then brings up the parasites. Um, and goats are more prone to internal parasites, or I guess more prone to the impact of them than a sheep or a cow. And it is, they're designed to eat high up. So they aren't typically designed to be eating off the ground where the parasites live. Um, but if you learn the sort of life cycle of those parasites, most of them, the ones that cause the big issue being the barber pole worm, um, it has to hatch and then it has to go through, I believe, 3 larval stages before it's infectious. And that process takes about 5 days in optimum condition. So the egg is laid when the animal poops in the grass, and then it can hatch within a matter of hours, but then it has to go through stage 1 larva and then stage 2, and then it's stage 3 where it's infectious again to the goat if the goat eats it. So if you're moving the goat in that, or if you're moving your herd within that 5-day window, which would be too long anyway if you're doing the rotational grazing for the sake of grass, then you stay ahead of the parasites in that way. And so the parasites aren't as much of an issue to them grazing.
So, Morgan, for somebody like me who's a beginner, and maybe, maybe there's some people listening right now that are interested in goats, like maybe you piqued their interest. Can you kind of lay this out for us? You talk about how your farming practices follow nature's cycles of this grazing, browsing, movement, rest, and regeneration. Can you just kind of paint a picture for us of like, what does that look like in a day or in a week? Like you managing the goats. What does this actually look like in practice?
Sure. So well, let's start in the winter because we just came out of winter. So in the winter, we do keep our herd. So we keep our does and our bucks separate all of the time. We only bring a doe to a buck, or we'll bring the bucks to the does to be bred, but otherwise the bucks live separately. So the does kind of have the nicer barn setup because we are in Michigan and the winter gets very, very cold. The bucks have a three-sided shelter. But both of them, so they have barn access in the winter, and we do deep bedding, which I learned from Joel reading his books. And we actually just scooped out 2.5 feet thick of manure and composted straw and hay from this winter. And we bought an old manure spreader and spread it around the pasture area that we chose to kind of focus our efforts on. I'm overwhelmed by 16 acres. Joel, I don't know how you manage hundreds. So I was like, okay, mentally, I need to just choose a corner to focus on and really like just focus on this part. So we just scooped out, I don't even know how many loads, like 20 loads with this manure spreader or something.
Wow.
So that we do deep bedding, and it was steaming as we were as we were scooping it out. And they do really well on that. So basically, when the barn gets dirty in the winter, we just put down a new layer of straw, and we like the straw in the winter because it's cozy for them. So they're always laying in a clean place, keeping their udders clean. And they have hay nets. So we hang nets that have the hay in it to help them with that wanting to eat up above themselves. And then I milk them in the morning. I milk some of them in the morning and evening, but I can't keep up with all of it. With 2 little kids, we have a third on the way.
Aw,
So
congratulations.
thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Great.
Thank you. So, I'm doing the best I can, but most of them are once a day milking right now, which they do just fine with that transition. They're flexible in that way. So I milk in the morning, and in the winter, the girls have access to a small sort of dry lot area outside, but for the most part, they're in the barn so that, we do the deep bedding. When our goats have babies, it's typically in late winter and early spring, and we let our goats raise their own babies. So that is kind of, I would say, different than a lot of dairy sort of, I don't know that I would consider us a dairy operation. We have 30 does, but we let them dam raise. So the moms have their kids, and goats can easily have triplets, quadruplets. So they have a lot of babies for just 2 teats. But we let the moms raise the kids, and then around 2 weeks old, we start to separate those babies at night, and they go in a pen all together. And that way I can milk the moms in the morning, and then I give the babies back to mom during the day. So we're milk sharing. We're getting a little less milk that way, but I don't mind it because I think a goat raised by its own mother is going to be a more
Oh,
well-rounded.
oh yeah.
I mean, the most annoying thing for me in the world is a bottle baby goat.
Oh,
And I know, I know a lot of people are like, oh, but they're so cute when they're 5 or 10 pounds. But when they're 100 pounds, I do not want them jumping on me.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and they do that when they think you're their mother and you've always supplied their milk out of a bottle.
Yeah.
So we let, and they grow really well when they're with their mom. They start grazing or browsing very early because they see her do it. And as a mother myself, I just can't take babies from a mom. That's just
Mhm.
personal, my personal opinion on it. So we
Mhm.
dam raise, and then in the spring and summer, when the weather is warmer, we start to move the herd out on a daily basis. So our does come back to the barn every night just for ease of milking again in the morning because our property is small enough. It's not hard for me to just walk them back. And they're very routine oriented. So once they know, they get very excited to go out during the day. They get very excited to come back in the evening. Um, and we rotate them in the premier electric netting in the areas of the property where it's open enough to do that. And then we do just 2 or 3 strand in the more wooded areas because putting up a net in the woods is really annoying. So yeah, we go for the strands there. And then, so the mineral bar is available to the does in the barn. So when they come back at night, they have access to that. Yeah, and then, so we have other animals as well, and we're trying to have this sort of cohesive dance with everyone. So we have a couple of horses. Horses can be really, really horrible for your land. So we have them on a paddock paradise system, which basically they have like a track around the outer perimeter of the property. Horses need a lot of movement for their digestion, unlike other grazers. So we give them that with the outer perimeter. And then the goats and the sheep are kind of the grazers within the perimeter and they get rotated around. And then we have chickens following behind to kind of clean up everything.
Wow. So when you let them out from the barn each day, you said when it's warmer, do they go to a new area each day? So you're guiding them, so each day they're getting something new, or is it like every couple days they're guided to a new area? Like what does that look like for rotating on the land?
Yeah, so it depends on how dense the area was that we put them in. So, I mean, at minimum, they need to move off of an area after about 3 or 4 days just for that parasite cycle.
Okay.
But so if we put them in an area that's really heavily, like there's a lot of forage and browse there, I kind of gauge at the end of that day when I bring them back. Does it look like there's still more for them to do? Do I want them to impact this spot harder? Like if there's something we're trying to get rid of, we have autumn olives really bad here, and they have hefty thorns on them, and the goats will just nibble them bare. It's amazing. So if I'm really wanting them to wipe something out, I'll keep them, take them back to that spot for a few days. But if I'm just wanting to sort of clip and not, take something out, then it'll just be for one day. So it really depends on the growth of the area that I've put them in and the goal that I want for them to accomplish there. Um, and so, like Joel had said, the browse, the plants like the shrubs and the trees that have a slower growth rate, it's easier to overgraze them to the point of killing the plants, which sometimes is the goal if you're trying to get rid of that kind of stuff. And so we would just move them back to that spot sooner. But it depends kind of on where they're headed and what I'm hoping to achieve from that space. But I just take a bucket with a little bit of alfalfa pellets and a bit of grain and shake it. And there's always a lead doe. There's always a leader, and ours is Matilda. She's huge Nubian. I think she's like over 200 pounds. Um,
Wow.
and it's so funny to see her. And then we have all the way down to the Nigerian dwarf. So we'll have, and the babies go with the moms. So that's the great thing about dam raising is the babies from the get-go, they learn the routine and they're not going to leave mom. So even though they may be intimidated or, nervous about this new thing, they're going to follow mom. So Matilda leads the way, she's following me, and there's just a trail of teeny tiny all the way down to the babies behind her, just running along, trying to keep up. So they, like I said, they learn the routine really quickly and they're excited to get out and graze and browse and get a little bit of grain to get them out there and then a little bit to get them back.
Well, Matilda hogs down all those alfalfa pellets all the time, so that's why she's twice as big as everybody else.
Yeah, she's a big girl. She's our matriarch. She's
Yeah,
8 years old too, so she's not old yet, but she's up there. She's the boss, and what she says goes.
yeah, yeah. For our listeners who know that I'm a almost a cultish daily move person. The beauty of goats, one of the beauties of goats, they don't have as important a regimen for daily move as cows because they do tend to graze a lot above their shoulders. So they're not actually grazing right over their defecation. And their manure is little tiny balls as opposed to great big pies. And so so it's just it's a more fastidious environment. And so the daily move is not as important, is not as critical on a goat than it is as it is, say, on a cow, where they're actually, I mean, cows will, they step in their cow pies, and carry it along. Where sheep, I mean, goats and sheep too, but goats especially tend to not step in their defecation. I mean, not only do they not graze over it, but they don't even hardly step in it because it's little pieces a little bigger than rabbit rabbit droppings. So it's pretty fastidious.
Yes, that's true. And it is a bonus for me when I'm milking. I'm not wiping wet cow pie off of an
Yeah.
udder. The little goat pebbles are a little easier to manage in that way.
Friends, want to dive deeper into our thought-provoking conversations? Become part of the Beyond Labels family today by joining below. For any gift amount, you'll get access to the full uncut episodes.
Every contribution, whether big or small, keeps this podcast going.
So join us and expand your Beyond Labels experience. Thank you.